This video is going to demonstrate the effects of using dither on digital audio versus not using dither. And I'm using, to demonstrate that, a test tone. It's a simple 1 kilohertz test tone. If we look at the frequency plot of it, we can see there's just one spike. It's quite low level. It's down at kind of minus 60 dBs or so. So I'm going to play you that test tone. And now I'm going to play you that same test tone, but at 8 bits resolution, which is a pretty lo-fi digital audio signal, but is great for demonstrating this concept, with and without dither. I'm going to start by playing to you with dither. So instantly you can hear there's a lot of hiss. That hiss is the dither. It's random noise that's added to the signal to prevent quantization error. If we look at the frequency analysis, here's the noise, that's the dither, there's the test tone. If I flick back to the pure test tone, you can see the difference. The tone is exactly the same, there's just much more noise from the dither. Now I'm going to play you and show you that same test tone at 8 bits without dither. Okay, you can see that looks very different. Let's see how it sounds. I think you can hear that pretty clearly. I'll just flick backwards and forwards. And here's the dithered one again. That, in a nutshell, is the difference between dither, which randomizes and smooths the quantization distortion, but gives you hiss, or just putting up with the quantization distortion caused when you truncate a digital audio signal. And I think it's pretty clear why it's called truncation distortion. So that's an 8-bit signal, but nobody uses 8-bit audio these days. The lowest quality you're going to get is probably 16-bit. So does the same thing happen at 16 bits? Well, let's check it out. Here is the 16-bit dithered signal. And here is the original. We could look at the spectrum. There's very little difference, I think you'll agree. Now let's look at the undithered 16-bit version. And suddenly the distortion is back. Now it's at a much lower level than it was with the 8-bit signal, much lower level, but it is still there. And that's the basic choice you have to make when you're deciding whether or not to use dither. And I would argue that you should always use dither. I would say a little bit of low-level hiss is always better than this mush, because even though this is very low level, it's the same stuff as this, which sounds like this. So just imagine that being done to all of your low-level audio signals. And actually, that kind of distortion gets added to every single sine wave that builds up the frequency analysis of a musical sound. So whenever you truncate something, whenever you bounce it down, consolidate it, or export it to a 16 or a 24-bit file, without using dither, you're adding some of this to your music. It's at a very low level, but if you do that over and over again, it builds up. Every time it's different. For me, it's a no-brainer. This is preferable to this. But I hear a lot of people saying you only need to dither when you reduce the bit depth, and that is technically what's happening here. My original test tone was a 32-bit floating point file, and I'm playing it to you at 8 and 16 bits, so it's being reduced in bit depth, therefore it's being truncated, therefore it needs dithering. So why do we need to do this every time we process audio? The answer to that is because most audio software these days uses 32-bit floating point internally. So as soon as you do anything in order to maximize the signal quality, it's storing a much higher bit depth file. If you save in 32-bit floating point, it's fine. You don't have to use dither. But if you save out as 16 or even 24-bit audio, I would say at that point you should use dither to prevent quantization distortion building up, especially if you're going to be saving it over and over again. If your application doesn't use 32-bit floating point internally, and that means all versions of Pro Tools prior to version 10, personally I would say it's even more important to use dither. In theory, every plugin, every process that you use should use dither to maintain the maximum signal quality at 24 bits, but I say it's not worth taking any chances. And you will hear some people say that all of this theoretical stuff with sine waves is all very well, but you can't hear this stuff on real music. Well, I disagree. It depends what the music is, depends what the recording sounds like, and I guess you could say that maybe the two things sound different. Dither sounds one way, the distortion sounds another. For me, some of our favourite recordings of all time are absolutely bathed in tape hiss, far more than you would ever get from applying dither 100 times. Hiss is our friend. Unnatural digital distortion is one of the enemies of good sound. It's one of the reasons people always said digital sounded bad in the first place. I say avoid it like the plague. So I hope that helps you understand why I advocate that you should always use dither when you're saving out at 16 or 24-bit. There's some more discussion about this in the blog post for this video. There's a link underneath the video, and there are also links to 2 other posts I've done about dither if you want a little bit more detail and a little bit more of the theory, as well as lots of more exciting stuff, maybe. So yeah, thanks for watching. My name's Ian Shepherd. Come over and check out the Production Advice website.